This is about to be one of the most treacherous journeys I've ever embarked on, and either way, it's going to be a win-win for you. Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group, personal injury lawyers, ROBES, Robes Law Group, in the community for you, based in Delray Beach. They are the finest at what they do, protecting you and making sure that your rights are restored, making sure that your rights are protected. Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. All right. So, Florida Atlantic Voice, I am the voice of FAU, Ken LaVicka. I am in full study mode now, cram mode, if you will. It's like I'm reliving college, and I'm making sure that I have all of the information you're going to need about the team and the new players and the old players when kickoff happens at Maryland at noon, August 30th. So I've been out at a bunch of preseason practice. I've been sweating. I mean, it is the worst. And I know we talk about it a lot, and I know that a lot of you are in South Florida. You get it. It's no different from what you're experiencing, but I don't know if I'm getting older. I don't know if it's getting worse, but this stuff is more sauna-like by the year, these fall practices. And I tell you what, things, though, have progressed. There's a lot of athleticism with this FAU football team. They have been getting after it, and the season's getting here. The season is now profoundly close at this point. So, what we're going to do today, you've got two options. Both are going to happen regardless. This isn't choose your own adventure, but this is why, even if there are some tough moments, this is going to be worth your while. Because what we are discussing today is FAU's abysmal red zone production in 2024. Now, that's going to be hard to hear because you're going to see how Florida Atlantic just threw the season away last year inside the 20 and didn't do it just once, did it over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. Now, there are a lot of numbers involved in this. There was a lot of research that went into this, a lot of number crunching that was executed. Now, this is not my forte. This is not my strength, the whole numbers thing. I respect analytics. I follow analytics. But as far as doing the math to come up with the analytics, that ain't my thing. So I've attempted it this time around. So you might be saying to yourself, oh, a podcast full of numbers? I don't know, Ken. I don't know if I can make it. Trust me when I tell you, I tried to make this as minutia-free as possible, but also there is a great chance that I completely crash and burn trying to convey all these numbers to you. That is a win for you. That is something you can hold over my head. That is something that you can, anytime you see me during the course of this athletics year, just poke and prod and make fun of me for if that takes place. Full face plant is possible here. Then there is a payoff at the end, and that is Zach Kittley and just how opportunistic Texas Tech was last season in the red zone. So you're going to want to hang on for that. I promise I'm going to finish all of this with a silver lining for you, okay? Florida Atlantic Voice, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to tell your friends. Make sure to tell the FAU fans in your life, especially if you have some new students that you know heading into Florida Atlantic. Let's get the next generation going, the next class going, and let's get them locked in to the Florida Atlantic Voice. This is for the FAU fan from someone who has been inside FAU for an awful long time. Okay, so we're talking Florida Atlantic red zone, and I think it's important to give perspective about last year when we discuss what's going to be you need to be fixed in 2025. All right, so let's just recap. Florida Atlantic 3-9 last year. Okay, 3-9. And we know that FAU had problems. There was a quarterback production problem. There was a run defense production problem or lack thereof. There were issues, late game execution. Those are well documented. But one thing I don't think was focused on enough was Florida Atlantic's offense in the red zone, and just how intensely wasteful it was, just how much of a black hole it was. Was it the worst in the country? No. But I can make the argument, and I'm going to attempt to do that today, that Florida Atlantic's red zone offense cost it the season overall. All right. So Florida Atlantic in 2024 had 42 red zone opportunities. Okay. 42 red zone opportunities. That is well into the bottom quarter of the country. 30 scores for a 71.43% conversion rate. You're going to hear that number a lot throughout the course of this podcast, as you are 42 red zone opportunities. You just commit it to memory, okay? 71.43 conversion rate. That is the bottom quarter of college football, as you'd imagine, that red zone conversion rate. And FAU had 23 touchdowns in their 42 red zone opportunities, okay? So let's recap that, just so you have these baseline numbers that everything we do from here on out is going to be calculated off of, okay? These are your base numbers where we come to all of our conclusions and then look ahead to potential goals off of all of these. 42 red zone opportunities for FAU in 2024, 30 scores, so came up empty on 12 of them. That's a 71.43% conversion rate. 23 touchdowns. All of those numbers are either bottom third or bottom quarter of all of college football. All right. Now, let's just go through game by game to look at where FAU came up empty and the circumstance in those red zone situations last year. Okay. There's the opener against Michigan State. First quarter, Cam Fancher intercepted inside the 15. Okay. That wasn't, though, the red zone opportunity, but that was a failed chance of something that then took place inside the red zone, even if the play didn't start in the red zone. Okay, that matters. First possession, third quarter, Cam Fancher sacked. The line of scrimmage was the Michigan State 17. He lost 9 yards on the play, and then a subsequent field goal attempt was no good. And then FAU's lone touchdown of that opener against Michigan State, red zone touchdown, happened in the fourth quarter, but FAU ends up losing 16-10, okay? Against Army, Florida Atlantic, 1 of 2 in the red zone. Now, it really didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. FAU had a red zone touchdown in the third quarter, and then down 24-7. Cam Fancher was stuffed on a 4th and goal at the 2 late in the fourth quarter. Would have made it a 2-score game. Probably, all things considered, didn't matter. Then there is the Shula Bowl, where Florida Atlantic routed FIU, as is tradition. 5 of 7 in the red zone was FAU. 1 field goal miss in the second quarter in the red zone. Then other than that, FAU went touchdown, field goal, touchdown, 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 touchdown. Now, this is a little bit unfair to tack against it, but it's an official number. Florida Atlantic took a knee late in the fourth quarter. That counted against its red zone conversion rate. All right. So that's not truly fair, but again, it factors into the number. Against UConn, FAU in a night to forget there in East Hartford was actually 1 of 1 in the red zone. Only 1 trip to the red zone. FAU scored a touchdown in the third quarter. That made it 27-7. Again, FAU blew out FCS Wagner. The Owls were 6 of 7 in the red zone in that game. Touchdown in the first quarter. Cam Fancher intercepted in the end zone later in that period. Then touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown the rest of the way for FAU in the red zone. Now we get into the meat of AAC play. FAU is 0-1 in the American at this point after the loss to Army at home. Florida Atlantic in the loss that probably planted the seed for dismay during the 2024 campaign, North Texas, where FAU ended up gacking away the 10-point lead in just over 2 minutes. FAU was actually 6 of 6 in the red zone in this game, but it was settling for some field goals that you look back, and that cost Florida Atlantic this game in part. It wasn't just the defense. FAU scored red zone touchdown first quarter. In the second quarter, Florida Atlantic was at the North Texas 9. And here's the sequence of plays. Sack, stuff at the line of scrimmage, Jabari Mobley, 2-yard run. Come up empty, field goal, good. FAU settles for 3. Later in the second quarter, touchdown FAU. And then, prior to halftime, Florida Atlantic has a 3rd and 4 from the North Texas 9 and a ball that's simply thrown to the sticks, in traffic, incomplete, knocked away, have to settle for a field goal, okay? Then a third quarter touchdown from FAU. Then this one is key. Fourth quarter, all right? FAU is at the 20 of North Texas in the red zone. Cam Fancher loses 3. So Barry Mobley then gets 9 yards, makes up all those 3, an additional 6, gains 9 yards to the 14, setting up a 3rd and 4. What does FAU do? Throw to the sticks, even if it's complete, probably not going to be a first down. Instead, it's knocked to the turf, incomplete. FAU has to kick a field goal. So instead of putting themselves in a spot where FAU is going to go up 3 scores potentially, settle for a field goal, keeps it at 2 scores, and that allows North Texas to come back with their incredible effort in the fourth quarter for the win. Then there's the trip to San Antonio, where Florida Atlantic was 1 of 3 in a 14-point loss. Had a fourth quarter lead, gave it away. FAU gets a second quarter red zone touchdown. Also in the second quarter, FAU turnover on downs at the UTSA 6. FAU had a 3rd and 2 at the UTSA 7-yard line. Fancher, 1-yard run, gets stuffed at the line of scrimmage. It's 4th and 1 at the 6. And Fancher tries to hit Jabari Mobley in the flat at the sticks. Incomplete. Threw it behind him. FAU turns it over on 4th and 1. That one was killer. That one was killer. And then, before halftime, FAU fumbles at the UTSA 12. And I believe that was a Cam Fancher fumble. So, you see there in a 14-point game, like those loom large. You had 2 red zone trips. It wasn't as if you even settled for field goals there. FAU had 3 red zone trips in the second quarter at UTSA, scored a touchdown on 1, turned it over on the other 2. That is absolutely deadly. Then there's USF. FAU is 1 of 3 in the red zone. And just in addition to this, Florida Atlantic ended up accumulating 4 turnovers on downs in this game. Just to add insult to 1 of 3 red zone injury, okay? Florida Atlantic first quarter, touchdown, red zone. Second quarter, missed field goal in the red zone. Third quarter, turnover on downs at the USF 3, okay? That one really, really hurts. This was still a game in the fourth quarter. Like, I know that USF ended up opening up the deficit in the fourth quarter, and USF fans will crow about a blowout victory and then celebrate the Alex Golish Ole handshake of Tom Herman, where Tom Herman then chased after him. I get that, but this was not a game that was decided in the fourth quarter. But Florida Atlantic really put itself in a spot where then USF was able to decide it with the problems in the red zone. So again, this is another game, just like UTSA, where you are 1 of 3 in the red zone. You score a touchdown on your first, and then you come up empty on your other 2. I mean, that is how you lose football games over and over and over and over and over again. Against East Carolina, Florida Atlantic 2 of 3 in the red zone. This game was over, though, before FAU got to the red zone the first time. But let's just track it since we've done it every other game. FAU second quarter, touchdown, red zone. That's Kason Wiseman in the game at this point after Cam Fancher suffered a season-ending collarbone issue. FAU, though, was already down 21-0 by the time this happened. Third quarter, Casey Wiseman intercepted in the end zone after a 91-yard drive. FAU was down 42-7 at this point. And then a meaningless touchdown, fourth quarter. But the defense was certainly the culprit in this game, and that's what had Rock Bellantoni fired as defensive coordinator for, a week. Then the trip to Temple. That's the overtime loss. This is the one that spelled the end for Tom Herman. So Florida Atlantic, first quarter, turnover on downs. You're seeing a little bit of a trend here, right? FAU first quarter, turnover on down to the Temple 9. FAU had first and 10 at the Temple 17, ran it 3 straight times. 1 yard, 6 yards, 1 yard, and then on fourth down, you throw the ball. Casey Wiseman, incomplete. FAU turns it over on downs. FAU had a red zone touchdown second quarter, had a red zone touchdown in the fourth quarter. That was the one right before the end of regulation, which led to the Philly special 2-point conversion that then forced overtime. But then in the overtime, FAU has first and 10 at the Temple 12, gets stuffed to the line of scrimmage, no gain. Wiseman is sacked, loses 6 yards. Then he's sacked again, loses 5 yards. Or check that. That's not Casey Wiseman at that point. Wiseman was actually knocked out of the game at this point. And so that's my fault right there. And I know that this is all just sort of elementary at this point, but I do want to make sure that I get this right, because if we're going to go through all these numbers and we're going to go through all of these numerations, got to get this right, correct? Tyreek Starks is who was in at quarterback and was sacked twice in that sequence. Then FAU, after the loss of yardage, no good. 40-yard attempt, misses wide left, and Temple would go on to kick a game-winning field goal. Then there's Charlotte, the Charlotte game, where FAU went 2 of 2 in that game, but no touchdowns to speak of. FAU first and goal to Charlotte 2, a run for a yard, a run for a loss of 2, and then incomplete in the end zone from the 3, settle for a field goal. That was the first quarter. Then in the second quarter, very similar. First and goal to 7, you lose a yard on the ground, a 2-yard pass, then you're incomplete in the end zone again from Tyreek Starks, and FAU, instead of 14 points on 2 of 2 in the red zone, is 6 points in the red zone. Then there's Tulsa, 2 of 2, third quarter touchdown, fourth quarter touchdown, one of the few times FAU able to all season long maximize its time in the red zone, and everything went well for Florida Atlantic against Tulsa. So I know that there's a lot there to consume, but I felt it necessary to go game by game just to show you that even when FAU had games where they were good in the red zone, they were still leaving points off the board. They still weren't fully taking advantage of opportunities, okay? And keep in mind, FAU had 42 red zone opportunities, 30 scores. We haven't gone through this number yet, though. 30 scores, 71.43 conversion rate. Here's the number we haven't gotten to. Of those 30 scores, FAU, 23 touchdowns. So you had to settle for 7 field goals in that spot, and several missed field goals within those red zone opportunities that then you settle for field goals, and then you subsequently miss the field goal. So it's not good enough. But I'm about to further drive that point home, because then you get into the red zone attempts. And I went through each league in the conference, okay? Red zone attempts and their conversion rate. Keep in mind, FAU at 71.4% conversion rate, okay? Now, red zone attempts, FAU at 42. I was tied for 89th in all of college football. Let's go top to bottom in the league red zone attempts. UTSA, 57, okay? North Texas, 56. Tulane, 56. Army, 55. Memphis, 54. USF, 51. East Carolina, 49. UAB, 44. Navy with 42. And put a pin on that because we're coming back to it. Navy, the same number of red zone opportunities as FAU, 42. But you'll never guess how much more successful Navy was than FAU with those 42 attempts. Again, we'll get to it. Rice, one of 4 teams below FAU in the conference, 41. Tulsa, 38. Temple, 33. Charlotte, 31. Put another pin in that one, okay? So Florida Atlantic tied for the 5th worst red zone opportunities mark in the American last year. Now we go to conversion rate. FAU is at 71.4%, okay? You have Army with its 4th best red zone attempts at 90.9%, just bulldozing teams, okay? Then there's Charlotte, and yes, they only had 31 red zone opportunities. That was worst in the league, but they converted them at a 90.3% clip. That's going to loom large here as we go through, just to show you how wasteful FAU was in the red zone. All right? And then we go down the line with conversion percentage. You had Memphis at 88.5%. You had Navy at 88.1%. So FAU, 42 red zone opportunities, 71.4% conversion rate. Navy, 42 red zone opportunities, 88.1, and 11 more touchdowns than FAU, despite the same number of red zone opportunities. That right there is the difference between Navy competing for an AAC title and FAU having to overhaul the entire program. That right there. That right there. UTSA, 87.7%. Tulane, 86.2%. USF, 86.3%. Then there's UAB, 79.6%. Followed by East Carolina, 75.5%. North Texas, 75%. You have East Carolina, 75.5%. Temple, 72.7%. Then you finally get to FAU, 71.4%. Tulsa, 71.1%. Rice, 67. I checked that. 65.9%. Okay? So FAU, 4th worst conversion rate in the red zone in the American. Couple of things off of this. FAU, this is all of college football. The least number of scores, okay? The least number of scores by 5. The least number of conversion percentage by almost 12%. And the least number of touchdowns. And the least number of red zone points, minus 18, of the 4 teams that were at 42 attempts in college football in the red zone. Those 4 teams were Navy, Maryland, Hawaii, and FAU, okay? Navy, Maryland, Hawaii, FAU all had 42 attempts in the red zone last year. Of those 4 teams, FAU, by a wide margin, 5, had the least number of scores of that 4-team conglomerate. They were 12% behind the 3rd-place team of the 42 red zone opportunities in conversion percentage. FAU had 1 fewer touchdown than Hawaii of the 4 teams. Those were the bottom 2 of the 4 teams, 42 opportunity red zone, that quad. And then FAU, 18 red zone points behind 3rd place Hawaii of the 4 teams that had 42 red zone opportunities. So not only is FAU one of the bottom of the barrel teams in the American when it came to the red zone across the board, their peers at the 42 red zone opportunity mark in all of college football, they were the worst team of those 4 as well when it came to red zone. That hurts. That hurts. Big time. Now, let's continue on here. All right? And there are 2 angles I want to take at this. Florida Atlantic and Navy, as I said multiple times, 42 red zone opportunities on the year, okay? Both teams had 42 red zone opportunities. Florida Atlantic converts at a 71.43 conversion rate, okay? 3-9 FAU, a 71.43% conversion rate of their 42 red zone opportunities, all right? Navy, same number of red zone opportunities, 42, but they finished 10-3 on the season. They finished 6-2 in the American. They're in the race until the final 2 weeks for the AAC title. It was still the AAC then. That's why I can say that. Why, oh, why do you think that Navy would have 10 wins with 42 red zone opportunities as opposed to FAU's 3 victories with 42 red zone opportunities? Here's why. Flat out, period. Navy was almost 17% better in the red zone than FAU, converting their red zone attempts, okay? And Navy, with its 34 touchdowns compared to FAU's 23, it really opened up the scoring margin. If you do all the math between Navy and FAU, who both were in the red zone 42 times, Navy scored 66 more touchdown points than FAU did. We're not even counting extra points here yet. FAU and Navy had the same red zone opportunities last year. Navy compiled 66 more points in the end zone than FAU did when they got to the red zone, as opposed to FAU. That is your difference right there on its face between 10 wins for Navy and 3 wins for FAU. That is profound. That is absolutely profound. And then there is FAU and the worst team in red zone opportunities in the American, Charlotte, okay? FAU had 42 red zone opportunities. We've established that. Charlotte, 31 red zone opportunities. Florida Atlantic had only a 24-point advantage over Charlotte, despite having 11 more red zone opportunities. So to put that into perspective, if Charlotte had an equal number of red zone attempts to FAU, and Charlotte converted at a 90.3% pace, which is what they did with 31 red zone opportunities, then even if they're owned all field goals, those conversions for Charlotte, they would overtake FAU in red zone points by 6, with 11 fewer red zone opportunities, but converting at their same clip, 90.3%. So Charlotte overtakes FAU if they have an equal number of red zone attempts to FAU, even if they're all field goals. 33 points right there. Don't have a single touchdown. But because Charlotte converted a 90.3% clip, they would overtake FAU in red zone points. FAU's 42 attempts at 71.43%. That's pretty telling right there as well. The last place team in red zone opportunities by a wide margin, minus 11 to FAU. And if Charlotte was able to muster the same amount of opportunities as FAU, don't even have to get in the end zone. You would outscore FAU because FAU, again, was so wasteful in the red zone. All right. So let's start averaging this out a little bit. I did all the math and the number crunching. Last year in the American, the American average was 46.4 red zone attempts, okay? FAU was obviously below that with 42. 46.4 red zone attempts. Let's go ahead and round down to 46, all right? Just for math purposes. So we'll keep FAU's conversion rate the same, 71.4%. 46 attempts, the American Athletic Conference average of red zone opportunities. at FAU's 71.4% is roughly 3 additional scores. If FAU was simply conference average in red zone attempts, that would be roughly 3 additional scores for FAU, and that adds anywhere from 9 to 21 points for you. And FAU did not miss an extra point last year. They were 30 of 30, so let's just assume if you get into the end zone 3 times with those 3 additional scores, you have 21 points. Now, let's look at games during the season, and to do this more accurately, games during the season where FAU had some misses in the red zone. Not settling for points even, settling for 3 as opposed to 7, but just flat out misses in the red zone, okay? Anywhere from 9 to 21 points. Let's go high end, okay? If FAU adds 9 to 21 points last year, that could, if we're talking high end, 21 points of that threshold, you overtake Michigan State. You get a win in East Lansing, okay? You overcome the 14-point deficit against UTSA. That has exhausted 20 of the 21 points in this additional 3-score hypothetical we're able to present if FAU simply at conference average in red zone opportunities, all right? So that doesn't get you to bowl eligibility, but it gives you 2 more wins, gives you 5 on the season, and Tom Herman's probably still the head coach at Florida Atlantic, all right? He gets a year 3. Now, how about if we go the other way? The American Athletic Conference average was an 80.7% red zone conversion rate. So let's couple that with FAU's 42 attempts, all right? So if FAU was simply the American average in conversion rate in the red zone, 80.7%, with the 42 attempts that FAU registered last year, that is just about 4 additional scores. It comes to 3.9. We'll round up. That, with 4 additional scores, is 12 to 28 extra points that FAU didn't have in 2024. All right? So then that changes all of this, what we just did, trying to extrapolate throughout the course of last season. FAU overtakes Michigan State, who they lost to by 6. There is a 4th win. FAU, remember, 1 of 3 in the red zone against UTSA. Only 7 points of those 3 trips. You erase the 14-point deficit at UTSA. You win that game, all right? So you've already erased 6 points at Michigan State for a win. You've already erased 14 points at UTSA, okay? You still have 8 points to work with, all right? And that's Temple. You lost in overtime by 3. There's the 3rd win. That 4 additional scores in the red zone, anywhere from 12 to 28 points, high end of that would give you in 2024. And there's your bowl eligibility right there. If FAU simply averaged 80.7%, sat on the American Athletic Conference average, 80.7% red zone conversion rate, that would have been enough with their 42 attempts to win 6 games and go to a bowl game. And then how about this? If FAU was simply average in the American, as opposed to being over 4 red zone attempts on the wrong end of the American average, and a full 9% worse in conversion rate than the American average, if FAU simply was right in the middle, simply right on that average line, 80.7% red zone conversion rate, 46 red zone attempts, that is over 7 more scores for Florida Atlantic. Low end, 21 additional points. High end, 42 additional points. Let's just be conservative and say FAU has 3 touchdowns and 4 field goal attempts of those additional 7 scores. That's 30 points on the board. You have your 6 wins, and then if you're high end, 42 points, not only is FAU bowl eligible, but they may be able to pull off a 7th win. There's your Charlotte game. where let's substitute the 2 red zone field goals for 2 red zone touchdowns. You have 7 wins. There's no drama whatsoever. And we're not even having any of these conversations about FAU football and pressing a reset button on the program. So as you can see, with all of these different numbers, all FAU had to do in the red zone last year was be average. Not nation average, conference average. And FAU was lacking so vastly, even trying to be average in the conference when it came to taking advantage of being in the red zone, that Florida Atlantic ended up with 3 wins on the year and a coaching change. You can pick the most damning number of all of this. For me, it's FAU and Navy having the same amount of red zone attempts and Navy scoring 66 more touchdown points. Like simply just off touchdowns. Forget field goals. 66 more points in the end zone than Florida Atlantic. And they both had 42 red zone attempts. And that's 7 wins difference right there. That in and of itself, just getting across the goal line when you get in the red zone. And the other one that really stands out to me is these averages. If FAU simply averages as many red zone attempts as the rest of the league, Tom Herman probably still has a job. If FAU, with its 42 attempts, has the league average in conversion rate, 80.7%, the Owls are bowl eligible. And if FAU is simply average in American red zone conversion rate and average in American red zone opportunities, then FAU might have 7 wins. And that finale against Tulsa would just be a great warm-up for a bowl game. So this is why I'm telling you, you can focus on the run defense all you want. You can say, oh, well, man, our quarterback play just wasn't good enough. Or, oh, our third and short. Like those are all true. But the biggest indicator, the largest umbrella that houses all of those smaller accumulating occurrences is the red zone. And just how ineffective FAU was in it last year. You can make the strong, overwhelming argument that Florida Atlantic's red zone failures in 2024 costed the entire season and cost a lot of people their jobs. Okay? Now, how is this going to change? Why should we feel hopeful this is going to change? Enter Zach Kittley's offense at Texas Tech. Okay? So, let's recall these numbers for FAU 2024. 42 red zone opportunities, 30 scores, 71.43% conversion rate, 23 touchdowns. That was FAU, okay? The 42 red zone opportunities tied for 89th in college football. FAU 71.4% red zone conversion rate, 128th in college football. Yikes. FAU's 30 scores in the red zone, 110th in all of college football. Oh, boy. Texas Tech, 19th in the nation, 90.32 red zone conversion rate. 17th in touchdowns with 40. Okay? So Texas Tech not only got into the red zone, they converted over 90%, and they put the ball in the end zone 40 times. All right? So these numbers, by the way, add in the Texas Tech bowl game. So we'll do the math off of a 12-game sample for Texas Tech in just a moment. As far as 13-game teams are concerned, these are teams that played an additional game, went to a bowl game. There were only 6 other teams who played 13 games that were top 17 in the red zone, like Texas Tech. Okay? And so Texas Tech's in rare air. One of only 7 teams who played 13 games that are top 17 in red zone conversions in 2024. And this is teams, by the way, in this top 17 who played 14 games, played 15 games, played 16 games, college football playoff teams. So Texas Tech, with just 13 games, in some spots, 3 below some of the teams that sat in the top 17, Texas Tech, part of those top 17, and one of only 7 teams to be able to camp out in the top 17 in red zone success of everybody who is at the top in college football. But fine, let's go to Texas Tech's 12-game sample, okay? This is before their Liberty Bowl appearance against Arkansas. Zach Kittley was already in Boca Raton, wasn't a part of anything that happened in that bowl game. All right? And by the way, in that bowl game, Texas Tech went 3 of 5 in the red zone. So, 12-game sample size for Texas Tech in the red zone. With Zach Kittley as the offensive coordinator each one of those 12 games. 57 attempts in the red zone. 57 opportunities, leading to 53 scores. 38 touchdowns of those 53 scores. That is 92.9%. Let's round up 93% conversion in the red zone for Texas Tech last year in the regular season. That, after 12 weeks of the year, was top 5, not in the Big 12, but top 5 in the country. That's right. FAU, bottom quarter of teams in the red zone last year in college football. Their head coach is now the offensive coordinator who helped lead Texas Tech to a top 5 in the nation red zone conversion rate. That's good news. And then there's the touchdowns. Remember, 23 touchdowns for FAU in 12 games in the red zone last year. Texas Tech had 38. 38. All right? So 12 games for Texas Tech. 93% conversion rate, 38 touchdowns. You compare that to FAU's 42 red zone opportunities and 23 touchdowns. Texas Tech in the red zone last year, simply just off of what they put together in 12 games. All total here, all right? And we're just working off of 6 points with these touchdowns. We haven't factored in extra points, but just 6 points touchdowns, all right? Texas Tech last year in the red zone, regular season, outscored Florida Atlantic 273 to 159. 273 to 159. If you put Texas Tech with those 273 red zone points in the American last year, guess who's a top 2 team in the American in red zone points? Texas Tech. And that, the man who was the architect of all of that red zone success, top 17 in the country, all games played, top 5 in the country through the regular season in the red zone, Zach Kittley, who is now the head coach at Florida Atlantic. So I know this is a lot. I know that we have covered a lot of numerals here, and I know it's difficult sometimes simply listening and not having these tangible numerals in front of you. But I'm trying to reinforce, and that's why I reiterated so many times, just so you could commit these numbers to memory, just how profoundly poor and below average FAU was, not just nationally, but in its own conference, which is ultimately what the biggest blow was, and just how easy it would have been if FAU could have played average football to be bowl eligible and save a whole lot of people an awful lot of box packing and moving their families across the country, and could save us so many questions when it has come to the health of this FAU football program. Simply, if FAU could have played average red zone football in 2024. But just based on Zach Kittley's history with not only his offense, and we can get caught up in all the yards and the points and the passing dominance. But the fact of the matter is, and Zach Kittley told me this earlier this week, when Zach Kittley's offenses get in the red zone, they score. But here's what Coach Kittley conveyed to me. Hey, when we get in the red zone, our objective is get it into the end zone. When we get in the red zone, the objective is get it into the end zone. He doesn't set a target number of conversions. He doesn't set a target number of points. It's flat out when we get to that 20-yard line or inside in the opponent's territory, all I care about is getting in the end zone, and we'll talk about the stats after the fact. How good is that? How good is that? So FAU fans, conventional wisdom would tell you that there is significantly greater not only red zone opportunities, and that's sizable, but red zone successes coming with Zach Kittley as the head coach, offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach at Florida Atlantic. And this is me telling you that last year's failures at Florida Atlantic, yeah, it was a confluence of a lot. But you can make the strong argument. You could write it in pen. You could save it to the document and close it and not be worried about having to make any revisions. Florida Atlantic's fatal flaw in 2024, what kept it from bowl eligibility, was quite simply how poor it was on offense in the red zone. That is a wrap for this edition of the Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Thank you to everybody over there. I really, 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 really overwhelmingly appreciate them and all of you for going to Robes Law Group for your personal injury lawyer needs. You never know when you're going to need one. Robes Law Group is the place to go when you need a personal injury lawyer. Nobody plans for it. Robes Law Group is the best, the easiest to work with, and they are going to fight so hard for you. Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Please, please, please hit that subscribe button. I am begging. I am not past begging you to hit the subscribe button and to tell the FAU fans in your life, to tell the loved ones in your life, even if they're not FAU fans, hey, you want a good, fun sports podcast with a guy who can talk by himself for an awful long time, go ahead and take a listen to this. If you know students at FAU, tell them. If there are incoming students, tell them. Just subscribe. Poke. That's all you need to. On your tablet, on your phone, on your computer, subscribe. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, Stitcher. It doesn't matter. If you're in Bulgaria, I don't know what you use over there, but my podcast, this podcast, is on all platforms. So even in Bulgaria, whatever you use, it'll be right there for you if you simply hit subscribe. I am Ken LaVicka, and the next time that I talk to you on the Florida Atlantic Voice, we're going to meet a couple of freaks in that FAU locker room. Thanks for listening. Thank you, as always, for supporting. This has been the Florida Atlantic Voice presented by Robes Law Group. I'm Ken LaVicka. Bye-bye.